Galaxy Research just downgraded its probability of the CLARITY Act passing in 2026 from an optimistic 75% down to a deeply concerning 60%. Polymarket traders have gone even further, pricing the odds of the bill actually becoming law this year at a coin flip 48%. The bill is not on the verge of a triumphant victory. It has slammed face first into a brutal congressional calendar wall ahead of the high-stakes November midterm elections. Today we deliver a forensic breakdown of the CLARITY Act standoff. We chart the exact legislative clock ticking down to the summer recess, expose the deep partisan friction points locking up the Senate floor, and outline the definitive strategic playbook for digital asset networks if Washington fails to deliver the rules of the road before the midterms. My name is Newell. This is the Signal and Noise podcast. Take a moment to like and subscribe. Let's dive in. To understand why this bill is in severe jeopardy, you have to look past the text of the legislation and study the physical parameters of the congressional calendar. A bill being placed on the Senate legislative calendar does not mean a vote has been scheduled. It simply means the bill is technically eligible to be scheduled. It is a car sitting in a massive traffic jam, and the clock is running out of battery. The mid-July red line, Congress is scheduled to enter its mandatory month-long summer recess at the very end of July, after which lawmakers will pivot entirely into survival mode for the November midterm elections. Senate Majority Leader John Thune faces an incredibly narrow window. If Thune does not explicitly carve out and guarantee precious floor debate time before mid-July, the CLARITY Act is effectively dead for the 2026 legislative year. The legislative traffic jam. The Senate isn't just sitting around waiting to debate digital assets. The CLARITY Act is actively competing against heavy, non-negotiable items, a massive national housing bill, a highly contentious farm bill, and a looming deadline for the recertification of a crucial surveillance law, a priority that has been aggressively heightened due to ongoing geopolitical tensions involving Iran. The reconciliation trap. Even if the Senate manages a miracle and passes the bill out of the chamber, the process isn't over. The Senate banking version must still be fully reconciled with a pending version from the Senate Agriculture Committee. It then has to enter a bicameral conference committee to resolve deep discrepancies with the version the House passed back in July 2025. Every single tick of the clock represents a compounding risk. The structural momentum is there, evidenced by over 200 crypto firms led by Stand With Crypto sending a joint letter demanding a vote. But institutional capital is realizing that public pressure cannot easily manufacture more hours in a crowded legislative day. Now let's look at the internal friction points. Why is the Senate leadership hesitating to bring this to an immediate floor vote? Because beneath the superficial 15-9 bipartisan committee vote, deep structural ideological warfare is being waged over specific amendments. There are three key battlegrounds currently stalling the legislation. The ethics clause standoff. Democratic senators are fiercely pushing for strict ethics amendments that would explicitly prohibit elected senior officials from owning or promoting digital assets. This has turned into a brutal party line fight, stalling backroom negotiations because it threatens the personal portfolios of several sitting lawmakers. The yield and retirement ban. The act currently contains a strict prohibition on digital asset platforms paying passive deposit-like yield or interest on idle wallet balances. Furthermore, intense debate remains over restricting digital assets from being included in tax-advantaged retirement accounts like 401ks. The DeFi safe harbor war. This is the ultimate sticking point for law enforcement groups and national security hardliners. The current draft of the CLARITY Act contains an incredibly progressive safe harbor provision. It states that DeFi software developers and network participants engaged in writing open source code are entirely exempt from federal securities laws. Sovereign state prosecutors are aggressively lobbying leadership, arguing that this safe harbor creates a massive, unregulatable loophole for illicit finance. The crypto industry views this provision as the absolute red line required to bring developer talent back to U.S. soil. This isn't simple political bickering. It is a fundamental disagreement on whether open source code constitutes an unregulated financial institution. So, what happens if the clock strikes mid-July? The Senate moves to recess, and the CLARITY Act falls into the post-midterm legislative graveyard. The structural ramifications will dictate the exact winners and losers of the next macro phase. The extension of the category error for compliant US-centric giants like Coinbase and Circle, a legislative failure is a massive near-term operational drag. The CLARITY Act is designed to formally strip the SEC of its spot market oversight, handing exclusive jurisdiction over digital commodities like Bitcoin and Ethereum directly to the CFTC. Without it, the era of regulation by enforcement continues unabated, forcing public crypto companies to spend millions on ongoing litigation rather than scaling infrastructure. The asymmetry of the $10 million institutional bet. Despite the falling odds, smart money isn't entirely retreating. Look at the structural signal sent by Galaxy Digital, executing a massive $10 million institutional prediction market trade, explicitly betting on a 2026 passage. Why? Because the asymmetric upside of the bill passing is so high that institutional desks are willing to buy the depressed 48% to 60% odds as a structural hedge. The minimum effective dose reality. But here is the ultimate macro signal for builders. The digital asset train has already left the station, with or without Washington's permission. Elite teams are transitioning to what policy experts call the minimum effective dose of regulation. Even if the CLARITY Act fails, the SEC and CFTC are being structurally forced away from arbitrary hostility due to rising institutional ETF ownership and national strategic concerns. Firms are treating agency-level signaling, no-action letters, and the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency's recent stablecoin reporting updates as the de facto rulebook. Capital is no longer freezing up when Congress stalls. It is simply rooting around the legislative bottleneck. Let's bring it all home to the definitive structural verdict on the CLARITY Act standoff. The noise. The placement of the bill on the Senate legislative calendar means a regulatory green light is guaranteed before the midterms. And a massive wave of compliant capital is about to trigger an immediate, legally sanctioned bull market. The signal. The legislative window is closing at an alarming rate. Partisan fights over ethics clauses and national security pushback against DeFi safe harbors mean the bill is highly likely to be delayed. But do not make the retail mistake of equating political gridlock with structural stagnation. The market has already adapted to operating in regulatory purgatory. While formal statutory clarity would violently accelerate institutional asset pipelines, the minimum effective dose of agency signaling is more than enough to sustain the boom. Stop waiting for a clean signal from a broken Washington calendar. Build for the plumbing that exists today, hedge for the legislative friction, and watch the capital accumulate regardless of the political noise. Stay sharp, stay focused. That's it for this policy edition of the Signal and Noise podcast. My name is Newell. Do well to like and subscribe. The politicians are fighting for votes, but the networks are fighting for throughput. Master the plumbing or get left behind. We'll see you on the next block.